Once upon a time, game developers had to rely on their own funds or get themselves a publisher in order to make a fully working title. Nowadays, however, it is even more possible for a studio to make a game completely publisher free, and as many of us know, these are called indie games. The games that mostly rely on digital distribution and innovation to get as much attention as they need to make a profit. Hello everyone, I am RedBeakRaven and welcome to a discussion video on the early access approach to video games. In this video, I will be talking about early access in general, mainly focusing on Steam Early Access by the way. I'll look at the positives, the problems I think it has, talk about some of the games, its relation to things like Kickstarter, and I'll talk about the state of early access and what to keep in mind when thinking about titles with this status. Just have a discussion about it all and get your thoughts on this. So let's get stuck into it. Now I highly doubt there are many of you who don't know what this is, but for those that don't, I'll just take some time to go into it. When we say early access, what we are generally referring to is Steam Early Access, which is a way for developers to get further funding for an ongoing project and allows us, the gamers, to support the devs while also getting something in return. The value of that return is obviously subject to opinion, and there's a chance that it could end up being worthless. Maybe worthless is a bit harsh, you can get some fun out of it, so I'll say it can end up being not worth the money you put into it. So yes, you buy games in their alpha stage, which is usually a very early stage in development, depending on how long it's being worked on. The developers can make money while creating the game, and we get to have a role in that development as well. So ideally, it's a win-win situation. I think the same goes for Xbox's game preview program, however, if what I've read is correct, the only difference is that on there you are able to download a demo first before actually making a purchase. Steam doesn't have this, but it does have a 2-hour refund window, so it's not exactly better or worse. Despite the fact that Valve frowns on using its refund system as a way to demo games. Well, that wouldn't be an issue if demos were more of a thing again, would it? PlayStation doesn't have anything like this, and I think it would be a good idea if they did, so that these indie projects can get more publicity and support, especially since both Sony and Microsoft are opening more of their doors to independent teams and their games. For example, We Happy Few released on the Xbox last year, and Sony recently promoted this piece of crap, which was kindly pointed out to us by Jim Sterling. Early access appears to be, and is at times, an exciting thing to get involved in. You play games first before a great number of people, but as you get older you'll realise that's not much of an achievement. I don't know, is that just me? You get the chance to shape the game by providing feedback that can help with the development and make it the game that you and the devs really want it to be. You provide the devs with essentially free QA testing by reporting bugs, etc., so the likelihood of the game being mostly bug-free and a smooth experience on launch increases. You get to see the game's progress and test out new features and see if it is shaping up to be what you wanted it to be, and of course, in the end, you get the game at a cheaper price. The main thing to remember is that you are paying for an unfinished product, which is what we seem to be doing a lot nowadays when you think about it. When did AAA start moving into the early access territory? So early access or game preview, whatever you want to call it, is a brilliant idea, and it really does help the indie studios in a way that wasn't possible probably 4 or 5 years ago. That's just a rough guess, but my understanding is that they had to use their own money, or some even got investments from elsewhere. One of the biggest issues for an indie team aside from financial support is the testing and promotion of their games. Early access provides a solution to both of these problems, more so the testing stage, but pro YouTube developers tend to have a much easier time marketing their games, because it's free advertising, something that a lot of people in not just the gaming industry but also music and film industry fail to see. So Steam Early Access first came out almost 4 years ago, which means this funding model is still a little bit new, and we've yet to see it succeed on a large scale. There have been some successes, as in the game sold well and have actually achieved a final release, but there isn't that many, and some didn't even appear first in the questionable paintwork that is Steam Early Access. Not only does early access help towards the development of a game, but crowdfunding is also an excellent way for devs to obtain funds. Things such as Kickstarter are not exactly in the same boat as early access, but they have been more successful than those that are glued to Steam. Sometimes a Kickstarter is all you need, especially if it's done right. Look at Wasteland 2, Superhot and the Banner Saga as good examples. The earliest example of a successful early access approach I know of was a game released in 2008 called Mount & Blade. This was a good game, and a very successful one at that. In fact, the Mount & Blade series has apparently sold over 6 million copies. That is astonishing for a game series where the development of its first title was supposedly funded by online sales of its beta version. I know it looks about as good as the 2004 version of RuneScape, at least the map does, but this was and still is to a degree a good game, although its sequel, or should I say expansion, Warband, is better. Mount & Blade was released in an early form back in 2004, and the devs managed to use crowdfunding to create Tale Worlds the following year. Now 11 years later they are still going strong and currently working on their next title, which is Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord, and I cannot wait to see what that is like. The next and probably best example of a successful early access approach is none other other than Minecraft. A game that started out as an indie project that has now made more money than I could ever imagine, has obtained a huge fan base and has become the second best selling game in history. The number one spot for that is taken by Tetris if you're interested. There you go, you learn something every day. So it's without a doubt that this approach does indeed work, but so far has only worked well for a small number of games. One of the reasons for that is because a lot of early access titles are yet to be released. Now this is where we start to take apart early access and see its negatives or potential negatives. So like I said, early access can be a win-win situation. There are many good reasons for developers to take advantage of early access, and there are many good reasons for us to get involved as well. I see it as a way to support indie developers as well as a way to make the game much better than it would be without our feedback and support. It's good for us because we can get games cheaper, we can try them out early, we can follow the game's progress, and it enables us to make a much wiser choice when considering and investing our money into a game. It's also beneficial to those that don't even buy the early access version because again, they can make a wiser choice and follow the game's progress to see if they'd actually like it. On the other hand though, there are risks involved. So first of all, there are risks on both ends of the spectrum. Let's not forget that it's not just about us, our time and our money. The developers have an even greater risk because not only is their product on the line, but also their reputation, their place in the industry perhaps, and also they have a lot more financial risk, even if they earn a lot of money. The obvious risks for gamers are that development ceases for various different reasons and we have no way of getting our money back. At least that is what you should kind of expect. There's the risk that the game was initially good, but then as time goes on you start to dislike the direction it's going. So like everything, there are risks. Now these don't necessarily apply to the current state of early access because they are things you should think about when considering buying such a product. Sometimes it's hard not to buy some of these titles because they look so good, and I am guilty of just buying early access games without thinking too much about it, mainly because I like the thought of supporting people who just want to create something they truly believe in, and I happen to like the idea as well. Who am I kidding? I just want cheap games. What? Hang on a minute, don't judge me. Have you seen the price of the Nintendo Switch games? What happens if they sell well and everyone else starts getting the idea to charge an extra £15 for 6-year-old games that aren't even remastered? In all seriousness though, I am in favour of supporting indie developers, more so now because I can't trust many AAA devs that much anymore. Not just because of all the technical and unfinished crap we've had to deal with this generation, but also because there are very few AAA titles that I actually like now. So far, since the beginning of last year, I only bought Doom, Mafia 3 and Watch Dogs 2. So there's 3 AAA games, which is actually an alright number I suppose, but the year before that, the only AAA games I bought was Metal Gear Solid 5 and Fallout 4. Obviously it depends on what is being released in personal tastes, but I used to get around 4 or 5 AAA games a year, especially in 2011-2012, those were decent years. Although just because I bought that many doesn't mean they were good, so that defeats the point of what I just said really, so ignore that and we'll move on. So I think that there are a few problems with early access games, despite how good the concept actually is, and the same could be said for crowdfunding projects as well. But like I said, that is a different scenario altogether, but it does have similarities. So due to Steam Early Access being around for about 4 years now, some of you might expect that we can take a good look at it and say, yep, that was a good or bad idea, but can we? There have been a lot of good things from Early Access, or at least so far. Many of the games are still to be finished, but there are a lot of games that are just not so good, and some appear to be just destined to fail titles because they are replicas of another Early Access game. I've noticed this particularly with the survival crafting games. We all love those, don't we? At least in moderation, which some devs fail to realise. However, we aren't or shouldn't be far from doing that because the average development cycle for a game is around 3 years, shall we say. I mean, it does vary, especially when talking about AAA and independent differences. The point there is that there are games that came to early access as soon as it started and are still not finished. Now this isn't a bad thing, or wouldn't be, had some of the developers not given people an educated guess on how long the development would take. This could be a bad thing for consoles though, specifically due to their lifespans, but that seems to be changing in the future, hopefully anyways. There are also other situations with some games that are 4 years in the making and are still full of bugs, and in some cases are unplayable. There have been understandable cancellations, which we should all know is a risk and isn't really a problem, so to speak, but there have been straight up abandonments and even some that have gone as far as to stealing money, which is unfortunately a risk we take as well, but it shouldn't be a concern, and it's disgusting to think that people have not only thought about it, but have actually done it. However, the problem with early access doesn't just come in the form of very long development cycles, money-grabbing con artists, and the lack of communication between devs and their fans, which has also happened on numerous occasions. You might say it's usual for communication to be lax with devs and publishers, especially when they've got nothing to show, but Kickstarter projects and early access titles are different in that regard. People are paying to follow the progress and they want to help, and if you constantly deny that help, then people aren't going to take as much interest anymore, and it's also a stupid decision for both marketing and development. The other problem problem with early access is those instances where the devs are, as we might say in the UK, taking the piss with early access. Basically, they are going too far with it, and it's only going to make things worse for those who want to go down the early access route in the future. A fine example, I think, of a studio going about early access in a not so good way is a developer of a very popular early access game that involves dinosaurs. Ark Survival Evolved is probably one of the most popular survival games out there and has had its fair share of controversy. This game was released in early access in the middle of 2015 and has had a good reception. I don't like it personally, but it is popular and liked by many people, or at least it was. The final version of this has been delayed a couple of times, but the problem with this lies in the fact that the developers, Wildcard Studios, released a paid DLC for a game that is still in early access. So it's essentially unfinished and they are already producing extra content with a price tag on it. I know this is old news, but still, it exists. This is like making me buy custard separately for my apple crumble, only there's no crumble, there's just the apple. And that was the best I could come up with. Food related analogy. Oh, shut up, everyone likes food. Okay, as I said, I don't like Ark Survival Evolved and therefore I don't play it, meaning I don't fully understand what's what in the game, but I am aware of the explanation the developers gave about this. If I understand it correctly, they wanted to stick the groundwork for future expansions in the game before it is launched so as to avoid potential problems. Now, I'm not against studios planning DLC before the main game's finished. I mean, a lot of them do that anyways and probably even start making it before the game is launched. But this is a different matter. The basic idea of early access is that you buy a game well before it's complete in order for your money to go towards the development of said game, therefore allowing the devs to both complete and potentially improve it. What got everyone's feathers ruffled when this expansion came out was the fact that Wildcard was spending the money on content that would be stuck behind a price tag, therefore bringing forth the argument that what's in the DLC should have been in the main game. As for the devs' reason for this, I personally don't think it was good enough. In fact, I don't think I could ever accept any reason from any developer for something like this. It's just a no-no in my book, especially when it's an early access title. Those that are working on crowdfunding and early access projects probably shouldn't even be spending time on DLC until the base game is finished, as that is what gamers are giving out their money for. I know there was a court case that the studio behind this game was involved in and they lost a substantial amount of money because of that. Some people argue that's the reason they released the expansion, that they needed money. Believe me, there are many arguments about this in forums, comment sections, all the usual places you go to when you fancy your chocolate-triggered gamers. Now, I'm not going to say them needing money is a weak argument, because it could very well be the reason behind it. We don't know what goes on behind closed doors, or they could simply be greedy, but regardless of what you think, whether you're with or against the developers on this, you can't deny that it was a bad move. It was bad for consumers and was bad for the look of early access, which is meant to solve problems within indie game production, not spawn a whole host of new ones. In a world before Steam Early Access, this type of thing wouldn't have been possible. In fact, it would have shaken the entire foundations of the bloody industry. Burning torches and pitchfork sales would have skyrocketed as angry gamers would have marched on the studio responsible for such an act. Another example of another problem, which is actually in relation to Kickstarter, is devs either forgetting their promises, breaking their promises, or just going about this all wrong. There is a certain zombie crafting survival building game out there that I bought in early access a couple of years ago. It first appeared on Kickstarter and had a huge amount of potential that just keeps getting wasted. That game is 7 Days to Die, which I no longer like as much as I used to, but I still have faith in the game even if it is very little. So the complaints over on Kickstarter for this are things like lack of communication, not delivering the pledge rewards, which is shocking to be honest. It's been over 3 years and it seems no one has received the items they pledged for. The other issue is that they released this on console and the game's not even finished on PC. I think the appropriate term here is enough said. Although they are still working on it and we don't have to worry about it being abandoned, but it is getting to a point where people are regretting spending money on it. Like I said though, these are risks we should all be aware of, but that doesn't make what the developers are doing right. I think it's safe to say that more than a few early access projects have really pissed people off, and that will likely affect the future of not only the studio related to it, but also early access as a whole. Of course, these are only 2 games I've mentioned that aren't giving early access or even crowdfunding your platforms a great look. There are plenty of them out there that have just added to the ever-growing pile of negativity that's associated with the early access approach. This, alongside the number of early access games continuing to grow, has caused the very notion of it to leave leave a bad taste in people's mouths. Which also leads me to say that Valve should get some of the blame for how large the bad side of early access has become. I said earlier that PlayStation should create a service like early access, but they should handle it much better than Valve has with this. Valve has a very hands-off attitude when it comes to Steam, as they have continuously in various ways expressed their desire for Steam to essentially run itself. The problem is, we've seen all too often how that isn't going to happen by just putting some ideas into play and hoping for the best. Early access sounds great on paper, and as I've already said, it is a good idea. It's a positive thing that has brought about some fantastic products that most likely wouldn't have seen the light of day without it, but it seems that instead of making sure the concept works as intended for the good of both the developer and the consumer, as well as keep it appealing, they've just left it for certain parties to make their own standards for early access games, thus tarnishing the label's reputation and in a bad way affecting the future of indie devs wanting to go down this route. It's not unexpected for some bad eggs to appear within a basket that's made up of a good idea. Like pretty much everything, there's a bad side to it, and certain people will light fires whether or not they know it's a good or bad move. What's probably affected the majority of early access projects is that to the average Steam user, it would appear at times that a large portion of new games are in early access, and that is reducing the amount of interest in the idea and potentially limiting the number of sales a new early access title will get. A lot of people are just sick of it, yet it can still be appealing. There are about a dozen games that are in early access that I follow on Steam. Yes, I actually managed to find some I like the look of in that mess that is the Steam store, but I haven't yet committed to buying them, as I learnt my lesson a while ago on buying an early access title without looking at anything but gameplay. The best example of a game I've taken a shine to, but I'm holding off buying it until it's progressed further, is Astroneer. This has received a lot of high praise from the Steam community, and so far is a fine example that early access can still be a good thing. From reading what the developers have put on the store page, I can tell that they know how a lot of people feel about early access nowadays and seem to be going about this carefully, or rather they are going about this as they should be. They've given an acceptable answer to the question of how long it will take to develop. They've given a target, but that's it. No estimation or definitive date, just what they are aiming for. They've made it clear that the game's in pre-alpha and what that comes with, which I think is a little bit too early for a game to be on early access, but agree to disagree and all that. Of course, at the minute this looks all good, but further down the line this could go topsy-turvy, which is what we all have to bear in mind. But you've got to have a little bit of faith, haven't you? If we didn't, then none of these games would get funded, and that's not an ideal way to get rid of the crap that should not be sold regardless of whether or not it's in early access. Overall, the early access approach to games is a good thing when done right. I know there's that annoying feeling that you get when you see a great looking game and in its release date box is coming soon to early access, or it's available just in early access, but at the end of the day I can't deny how glad I am this exists, because without it it's likely those great titles out there that are or were in early access wouldn't have provided me and many others with the hours of enjoyment they have. Despite me focusing more than half this video on the negatives of early access and not really going into the games that do deserve praise like Subnautica, Tower Unite, Space Engineers to an extent, The Forest and The Long Dark, all leading examples of how an early access game should be done might I add, I didn't make this video out of anger and frustration or just to crap on the devs that deserve a smack or two. I made this because I really want early access to become the successful and positive funding model I thought it was going to be 4 years ago. As much as I am getting sick of seeing that little blue box beneath a good looking game, I'm still open to the idea and understand its value to small teams of people out there with an ambition to create something different. I think it is important that we do consider supporting the portion of developers that are really trying to create something good. That is if you really want to, of course. I think the best advice if you want to get into early access projects is just be wary. Be selective, do research, remember that trust plays a big part in it, and also listen to what Valve has said. In 2014, Valve updated their early access FAQ and stated, "It's up to the developer to determine when they are ready to release. Some developers have a concrete deadline in mind, while others will get a better sense as the development of the game progresses. You should be aware that some teams will be unable to finish their games, so you should only buy an early access game if you are excited about playing it in its current state." Now, despite the fact that I don't entirely agree with Valve sitting behind this sweet little statement that allows them to just say "we warned you," I think it is a fair answer, and it does apply to those games that I myself have bought. Granted, that is more so the case because I bought about 4 of them during a Steam sale, but that's what Steam sales are there for. So to end this on a positive note, I'd like to point you to my other Steam early access video that highlights 4 early access titles with huge potential. 7 Days to Die is one of those 4, but I do state my concern with it in that video. The gameplay you've mostly been watching throughout this video is from probably my favourite early access title at this time, and that is Tower Unite. It's a great multiplayer experience if you're into in-game mini-games. Right, that is all I've got for this discussion video. Now let me know in the comments below what you think of early access or the early Xbox game preview program. Do you own any titles that are in this status? Have you had any bad experiences in relation to this, and do you think we should continue to support this approach? But apart from that, hit the like button if you like this video. You can also follow me on Twitter or like me on Facebook. You'll find the links to those near the bottom of the description. Anyways, that's all from me, so until next time, I'll see you soon.